a log, or a forest, a pond, or the ocean. These are just some of the ecosystems found in nature. An ecosystem is a functional and stable unit where all living organisms interact among themselves and with the surrounding physical environment, leading to a flow of energy and nutrients. There is great variation in the size of different ecosystems. In fact, we can consider the Earth or the biosphere as a giant ecosystem composed of small and large ecosystems. However, since it is difficult for us to study such a huge ecosystem in one go, we divide it into smaller ecosystems for convenience. Ecosystems are usually classified as natural and artificial. Natural ecosystems exist naturally in nature and function all by themselves. These ecosystems are further classified as terrestrial and aquatic ecosystems. Forests, deserts, and grasslands are some terrestrial ecosystems, while the ocean, lakes, and wetlands are some aquatic ecosystems. Unlike natural ecosystems, artificial ecosystems are created and maintained by human beings. Some artificial ecosystems are croplands, orchards, gardens, and aquariums. The structure of different ecosystems also varies greatly and involves the composition of a biological community in terms of number, biomass, life history, population, and distribution of species. The structure of an ecosystem also involves the availability and distribution of several non-living factors such as nutrients, water, and climatic and physical conditions. In other words, the two major components in any ecosystem are abiotic or non-living components and biotic or living components. There is a continuous interaction between the abiotic and biotic components of an ecosystem, resulting in a physical structure which forms a characteristic for each type of ecosystem. Also, an ecosystem has several plant and animal species, and their identification and enumeration gives us the composition of the species. The vertical distribution of different species occupying different levels is known as stratification. For instance, in a forest ecosystem, the trees occupy the top vertical strata or layer, followed by shrubs, herbs, and grasses. Two main processes occur in an ecosystem. 1. There is a continuous cycling of nutrients between living and non-living components, and 2. There is a continuous input of energy from an ultimate source, which is mainly the sun. This energy is tapped by the producers and is passed to other trophic levels in the ecosystem. Generally, the producers occupy the first trophic level at the base, followed by primary, secondary, and tertiary consumers. Now, let us learn about the functions of an ecosystem. All ecosystems, big or small, perform four major functions, namely productivity, decomposition, energy flow, and nutrient cycling. To better understand the structure and functions of an ecosystem, let us take the example of a small pond, which is a fairly self-sufficient system. Now, some of the abiotic components in this pond include water, rocks, soil, sunlight, and dissolved inorganic and organic substances such as oxygen, carbon dioxide, and nitrogen. It also includes dissolved inorganic salts in the form of nitrates, chlorides, and phosphates. Like abiotic components, there are several biotic components in this pond. These include autotrophic components like plants, phytoplanktons, and photosynthetic bacteria found both floating and submerged in water. The biotic components also include heterotrophic components like small and big fish, crustaceans, amphibians, beetles, and zooplanktons. Some of these heterotrophs are herbivorous, while others are carnivorous. The decomposers also fall under heterotrophic components and include several species of fungi and bacteria, usually found in abundance at the bottom of the pond. Now, in this pond, autotrophs such as algae produce their own food by converting inorganic material into organic compounds using the sun's energy. These algae are consumed by small fish, which in turn are consumed by bigger fish. Here, both the small and big fish are heterotrophs. Thus, autotrophs prepare their own food, and these autotrophs are consumed by heterotrophs. Thus, the functions of productivity and energy flow are clearly seen in this ecosystem. When the algae and fish in the pond die, the function of decomposition takes place. That is, the decomposers decay and mineralize the dead matter and release them back into the sediments and water, which are then reused by autotrophs. Thus, there is a unidirectional flow of energy from the lower to the higher trophic levels, with substantial amounts of energy being dissipated in the form of heat to the environment at various levels. Moreover, this example also demonstrates the function of nutrient or mineral cycling, as we can see nutrients flowing from autotrophs to heterotrophs and then to decomposers and back to autotrophs in a cyclic manner. In addition, the functioning of the entire pond is regulated by abiotic factors such as length of day, temperature, solar input, dissolved organic and inorganic materials, to name a few. Thus, the structure of ecosystems varies greatly, and its functioning depends on rate of nutrient and energy flow, and also the interrelation between living organisms and the environment, thereby forming a self-sustaining system. Did you know that if decomposers did not exist, the earth would be covered by a layer of dead flies about 20 feet deep within a month? Decomposers play a very important role in keeping our environment clean. They break down complex organic matter and convert it into simple inorganic substances like water, carbon carbon dioxide, and nutrients. This natural process is known as decomposition. The raw material for decomposition is the detritus, which comprises dead and decaying plant remains such as leaves, branches, flowers, roots, and dead animal remains, including fecal matter. Decomposition involves a series of important steps, namely fragmentation, leaching, catabolism, humification, and mineralization. Of these steps, fragmentation, leaching, and catabolism occur simultaneously on the detritus. During fragmentation, the detritus is broken down into smaller particles by detritivores, which are organisms that feed on and break down dead plant or animal matter while returning essential nutrients to the environment. Some examples of detritivores include fungi, insects like dung flies, and terrestrial worms such as earthworms and millipedes. During leaching, inorganic nutrients that are soluble in water drain into the soil and get precipitated as unavailable salts. While during catabolism, the detritus is further acted upon by bacteria and fungi and is degraded into simpler inorganic substances by the action of their enzymes. The next step of decomposition is humification, where the detritus gets converted into a dark amorphous substance called humus. Humus is extremely resistant to microbial action and thus has a very slow rate of decomposition. Moreover, it is also very colloidal in nature and therefore serves as a source of nutrients. Finally, during mineralization, the last step of decomposition, certain microbes act on the humus, degrade it, and release inorganic nutrients into the soil. Both humification and mineralization occur inside the soil. However, the process of decomposition is affected by several factors. It is primarily an oxygen-requiring process, and the chemical composition of the detritus, along with climatic factors such as temperature and soil moisture, affect the rate of decomposition. For a particular temperature, the rate of decomposition is slower if the detritus is rich in substances like lignin and chitin, and is faster if the detritus is rich in nitrogen and water-soluble substances like sugars. Climatic conditions such as temperature and soil moisture affect the activity of microbes, thus affecting the rate of decomposition. That is, the rate of decomposition is faster when the temperature is warm and the environment is moist, whereas low temperature and lack of oxygen favors anaerobiosis, which slows the process of decomposition and leads to a build-up of organic materials. Therefore, the process of decomposition helps to recycle the nutrients required for the very existence of life. The amount of biomass varies from one ecosystem to another. Biomass is the mass of living organisms or the organic matter in a unit area of an ecosystem at a given time. It is expressed in terms of mass per unit area, that is, gram per meter square. If we compare a forest desert, or tundra ecosystem, we find that the biomass of the forest ecosystem is greater than the other two. This is due to the presence of a large number of primary producers in the forest. Primary producers are organisms that can produce biomass from inorganic substances. They typically include photosynthetically active organisms such as plants, cyanobacteria or blue-green algae, and other unicellular organisms. During photosynthesis, plants use chlorophyll to fix inorganic substances such as water and carbon dioxide into organic substances such as glucose in the presence of sunlight, which acts as the main source of energy. So the light energy of the sun is converted into chemical energy of glucose or sugars. The glucose thus produced is converted into starch for storage in plants, or may be combined with other nutrients such as nitrogen, phosphorus or sulfur to produce other complex molecules such as proteins or nucleic acids, and is stored as biomass. Therefore, the amount of biomass produced per unit area by plants through photosynthesis is called primary production. Is expressed in terms of weight per unit area. That is, gram per meter square, or energy produced per unit area. That is, kilocalorie per meter square. The rate of primary production is called primary productivity. In other words, primary productivity is the amount of biomass produced per unit area and per unit time by plants during photosynthesis. To compare the productivity of different ecosystems, it is expressed in terms of weight per unit area and time. That is, gram per meter square per year, or energy produced per unit area and time. That is, kilocalories per meter square per year. The primary productivity of an ecosystem is dependent on the plant species inhabiting the area, and several other factors such as the photosynthetic capacity of plants and availability of nutrients. As a result, it varies from one ecosystem to another. Primary productivity can be categorized as gross primary productivity or GPP and net primary productivity or NPP. GPP is the total energy fixed by primary producers as biomass through photosynthetic activity per unit area per unit time. A fraction of this GPP is used by plants during respiration to meet their energy requirements. This is known as respiration losses and is denoted as R. Now, if respiration losses are subtracted from GPP, net primary productivity is obtained, which is the net biomass available for consumption by heterotrophs. Heterotrophs such as herbivores, carnivores, omnivores, and decomposers feed on this net biomass available either directly or indirectly and convert chemical energy of their food into their own biomass. The rate of formation of biomass by consumers, or the amount of biomass formed per unit area and time by consumers, is called secondary productivity. A part of the food consumed by heterotrophs is assimilated and is used for various metabolic activities such as respiration, growth, and reproduction, and the remaining is stored as biomass. Thus, the food or energy assimilated and stored by autotrophs is passed on to the consumers. Moreover, the efficiency with which this energy transfer takes place from one trophic level to the other is called energy efficiency. Did you know that the biosphere produces about 170 billion tons of net organic matter annually? However, the ocean accounts for just 55 billion tons of organic matter, even though it occupies 70% of the Earth's surface. The low NPP of oceans can be attributed to the small number of plant species inhabiting the oceans compared to land. So, the least productive ecosystems are the ones limited by sunlight and water, while the most productive ecosystems are the ones with high temperatures, plenty of water, and nutrients. In this manner, productivity is vital for the production of biomass in any ecosystem. All of us know about the pyramids of Egypt, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. This pyramid structure is also obtained when we illustrate the number or biomass or energy of different organisms at different trophic levels in an ecosystem, also known as the ecological pyramid. The ecological pyramid is a graphic representation of an ecological parameter such as number of individuals, amount of biomass, or amount of energy present at different trophic levels in an ecosystem. Trophic levels represent the position of organisms in the food chain. The base of an ecological pyramid represents the first trophic level or producers. The next trophic level comprises primary consumers, followed by secondary consumers, and finally tertiary consumers at the top. Each of these trophic levels represents a functional level and not a single species as such. Also, all the organisms at a particular trophic level must be considered for any calculation on number, biomass, or energy. For example, we need to consider all the organisms in trophic level 2, namely the grasshopper, mouse, and squirrel, for any calculations on number, biomass, or energy. This is because our generalizations will be invalid if we consider only a few organisms at any trophic level. However, it is also possible that a given organism simultaneously occupies more than one trophic level in the same ecosystem. For example, when a pigeon consumes grains and fruits, it is a primary consumer. Conversely, when the same pigeon consumes worms and insects, it becomes a secondary consumer. Based on the types of parameters used, ecological pyramids are of 3 types: pyramid of numbers, pyramid of biomass, and pyramid of energy. A pyramid of numbers is a graphic representation of the number of individuals per unit area present at various trophic levels in an ecosystem, and its shape varies from one ecosystem to another. For example, in grassland or pond ecosystems, there are a large number of autotrophs or producers per unit area. However, the number of herbivores that depend on these producers is few, and the number of carnivores that depend on the herbivores is still fewer. Therefore, in these two cases, the pyramid of numbers is an upright one, that is, converging towards the tip. Now, in a parasitic food chain like the one shown in the image, a single large tree is supplying food to a large number of herbivorous birds. These herbivorous birds, in turn, are food for a still larger population of ectoparasites, on which a large number of hyperparasites depend. Therefore, in this case, the pyramid of numbers is inverted. Now, consider a third case, where a single large tree provides food to a large number of herbivorous birds. These birds, in turn, are a source of food for carnivorous birds like eagles and kites, which are fewer in number, and hence the pyramid is spindle-shaped, that is, broader in the center and narrow above and below. Now, let's learn about the pyramid of biomass, which is a graphic representation of biomass present per unit area in each trophic level in an ecosystem. In a terrestrial ecosystem, producers have maximum biomass, which decreases progressively from lower to higher trophic levels. Therefore, the pyramid of biomass in a terrestrial ecosystem is always an upright one. On the other hand, the pyramid of biomass in an aquatic ecosystem is either inverted or spindle-shaped. For example, in the food chain shown in the image, the biomass of carnivorous fish is greater than herbivorous fish, and the biomass of the herbivorous fish is much greater than the producers or phytoplankton, leading to an inverted pyramid. However, in aquatic ecosystems like the ones found in the North Pacific Ocean, the pyramid of biomass is spindle-shaped, as the biomass of zooplankton exceeds that of the producers or phytoplankton, while the biomass of primary and secondary carnivores such as herring and sea lion gradually decreases as they are fewer in number compared to the zooplankton. Finally, a pyramid of energy is a graphic representation of the amount of energy trapped per unit time and unit area at different trophic levels of an ecosystem. Each bar in a pyramid of energy represents the energy present at each trophic level at a given time or annually per unit area. Energy is always higher at lower trophic levels, that is, the producer, and flows to higher levels. Moreover, some energy is used for the metabolic activities of organisms, and some energy is dissipated as heat in the process. That is why a pyramid of energy is always upright and never inverted. An ecological pyramid also has certain limitations. For instance, it always considers a simple food chain which doesn't exist in nature. Moreover, it doesn't consider a food web and does not take into account species that exist simultaneously at two or more trophic levels. Another limitation of an ecological pyramid is that it never takes into account decomposers or saprophytes, though they play a significant role in an ecosystem. In general, an ecological pyramid shows the feeding relationship between groups of organisms and also depicts the amount of biomass or energy present at various trophic levels in an ecosystem. These trees are part of a huge forest. However, the area covered by these trees was once a pond a few hundred years ago. Over a period of time, the population of the different aquatic plant and animal species in the pond was replaced by terrestrial plant and animal species. This gradual and fairly predictable change in the composition of different species in a given area is known as ecological succession. During ecological succession, the population of certain species increases, while that of many others may decline or even disappear. In fact, present-day communities across the world are the result of ecological succession that took place over several million years. It is assumed that succession and evolution are parallel processes in operation since time immemorial. All communities undergo constant changes in their composition and structure in response to changes in environmental conditions. These changes take place in a sequential and orderly manner, leading to a climax community which is in near equilibrium with the environment. For example, in the ecological succession from a pond to a forest, the climax community is the forest. Also, in the process of ecological succession, the sequence of communities that replace one another in a given area is known as a seer or seers. Each transitional community is called a seeral community or a seeral stage. In each successive seeral stage, the diversity of plant and animal species increases along with an increase in the number of species and total biomass. But what causes ecological succession? Primarily, there are two causes for ecological succession: biotic factors and physiographic factors. Biotic factors include interactions between different organisms in a community, leading to changes in composition, structure, and functions in that community. Physiographic factors, on the other hand, include physical factors like floods, erosion, and landslides, and chemical factors like nature of soil and water. Furthermore, ecological succession is of two types: primary and secondary. Primary succession is a type of biotic succession that takes place in areas where no life previously existed. Some such areas include bare rock, new islands exposed out of the sea, sand dunes, and newly created lava or a pond. The process of primary succession takes a very long time. A possible reason being that soil is required for the creation of new biotic communities, and the process of soil formation takes several hundred or thousand years depending on climatic conditions. Conversely, secondary succession is a type of biotic succession that takes place in areas that once had an existing biotic community, which was wiped out due to reasons like earthquakes, landslides, or fire. As secondary succession takes place in areas which once had congenial conditions for the existence of life, along with some existing soil or sediments, the time taken for this type of succession is comparatively less than for primary succession. However, at any time during the process of primary or secondary succession, man-made or natural disturbances can result in a particular seral stage being converted to an earlier stage. Now, let's learn about the process of ecological succession in plants. Based on the nature of the habitat, ecological succession of plants is categorized as hydrarch, mesarch, and xerarch. When succession takes place in regions with plenty of water, such as swamps, ponds, or lakes, it is known as hydrarch. Here, the succession series progresses from hydric or highly wet conditions to mesic or medium water conditions. On the other hand, when succession takes place in regions with moist, well-aerated soil, it is known as mesarch. Finally, succession in regions with minimum moisture, such as rocks and deserts, is known as xerarch. Here, the succession series progresses from xeric or highly dry conditions to mesic conditions. The species that invades a bare area during primary succession is known as the pioneer species, and it varies depending on the area where the succession is taking place. The pioneer species is usually the lichens when primary succession takes place on a rock. Lichens have the ability to secrete acids that dissolve rocks, helping in the processes of weathering and soil formation. The small amount of soil thus formed leads to the growth of plants like bryophytes or moss, which over a period of time get replaced by bigger plants like herbs and shrubs. After several succession stages, big plants get replaced by trees, leading to a stable climax forest. These are images of a terrestrial and an aquatic ecosystem. You can see that in both these ecosystems, the energy flow begins with the sun. In fact, The sun is the only source of energy for all ecosystems on Earth except for the deep-sea hydrothermal ecosystem, whose primary source of energy is the heat produced inside the Earth's crust. Of the sun's incident radiation, less than 50% is photosynthetically active radiation, or PAR, which is the spectral range of solar radiation that can be used by green plants for photosynthesis. However, in reality, plants utilize only about 2 to 10% of PAR, and incredibly, this small amount of energy sustains the whole world. In all ecosystems, the solar energy tapped by plants or producers is converted into chemical energy and is passed on to all other organisms. All organisms which are directly or indirectly dependent on producers for their food are known as consumers. Hence, there is an unidirectional flow of energy from the sun to producers and then to consumers. This flow of energy in the ecosystem can be depicted by a food chain, which also shows the interdependence of organisms. Here we can see that producers are food for herbivores, which in turn are food for primary carnivores. Likewise, primary carnivores are food for secondary carnivores. Thus, the energy of an organism in general does not remain inside it, but either flows to consumers or to decomposers when it dies. Now, in nature, there are two types of food chains: grazing food chain, or GFC, and detritus food chain, or DFC. Most ecosystems in nature follow the GFC. In a GFC, the energy flows from producers to grazing herbivores and finally to carnivores. Here we can see that the grass, deer, jackal and lion form a simple GFC. Another example of a GFC is an aquatic food chain comprising phytoplankton, zooplankton, small fish and large fish. The second type of food chain, that is the DFC, begins with detritus, or dead organic matter, which forms the primary source of energy. This detritus is broken down into simple inorganic materials by digestive enzymes secreted by decomposers or saprophytes, and is then absorbed by them to meet their nutrient requirements. Detritivores or decomposers may be consumed by detritivore consumers, which, in turn, may be preyed on by small or large carnivores. The DFC is usually shorter than a GFC. An interesting fact about GFC and DFC is that they may be connected at certain levels. This happens when an organism belonging to the GFC dies and enters the DFC, or when omnivores such as crows prey on organisms from the DFC. Such interconnection of food chains leads to the formation of a food web. It is also seen that the GFC forms the main channel for energy flow in aquatic ecosystems, while in terrestrial ecosystems, most of the energy flows through the DFC. Now, all organisms in a food chain occupy a specific place in the ecosystem depending on their source of food and nutrition, which is known as their trophic level. Producers belong to the first trophic level, followed by herbivores and finally carnivores. Also, the amount of energy decreases in successive trophic levels, and organisms at each trophic level fulfill their energy requirements from organisms at the lower trophic level. In addition, each trophic level has a certain mass of living material at a particular time, known as standing crop. It is measured as the biomass or the mass of living organisms or the number in a unit area, and is expressed either as fresh or dry weight. However, the number of trophic levels in a GFC is restricted and is anywhere between 3 and 5. This is because the transfer of energy follows a 10% law. That is, on average, only 10% of energy is transferred from one trophic level to another, while the rest is used up for metabolic activities of individuals or is lost as heat. Moreover, all ecosystems abide by the first and second laws of thermodynamics. This is because energy is being converted from one form to another as it is transferred from the sun to various organisms. In addition, the biosphere is continuously losing usable energy in the form of heat, thereby requiring the continuous supply of energy to organisms for the synthesis of molecules to resist the natural tendency of increasing disorderliness. Hence, we have seen that there is a continuous supply and flow of energy in all ecosystems, and this is vital for the sustenance of our biosphere. Any organic material present on this earth is used and reused again and again. For example, in a forest ecosystem, plants produce organic material or nutrients using the sun's energy, which is passed on to herbivores when they consume plants. The herbivores in turn are consumed by carnivores, and in this process, the organic matter is passed along to various animals. When these animals die, the organic material from each of them is made available to plants by decomposers. Therefore, organic matter or nutrients are never lost from an ecosystem, but are recycled over and over indefinitely. This cyclic movement of nutrient elements between organisms and the environment is known as nutrient cycling or biogeochemical cycles. Here, bio refers to living organisms and geo refers to water, rocks, air and soil on the earth, and chemical refers to nutrients such as carbon, phosphorus, calcium and iron, to name a few. Now, nutrient cycles are of two types, gaseous and sedimentary. In gaseous cycles, the atmosphere is the main reservoir of nutrients, whereas in sedimentary cycles, soil, rocks and minerals of the Earth's crust are the main reservoir of nutrients. Reservoirs serve to replenish nutrients in case of any imbalance arising out of variations in the rate of influx and efflux in the biosphere. The rate of release of nutrients into the atmosphere in both gaseous and sedimentary cycles is regulated by biotic factors or living organisms, as well as abiotic factors such as soil, temperature, moisture, and pH. At any given time, the amount of nutrients such as nitrogen, phosphorus, calcium, and carbon in soil is known as standing state. There are several important nutrient cycles that sustain life on Earth. Nitrogen, oxygen, carbon, and water are some of the important gaseous cycles, while phosphorus, calcium, and iron are some of the important sedimentary cycles. Let's learn in detail about the carbon and the phosphorus cycle. The carbon cycle is an important gaseous cycle. In fact, carbon is the fourth most abundant element in the universe and the principal constituent of all living organisms on Earth. It constitutes 49% of dry weight of organisms and forms one of the major components in living organisms other than water. The carbon cycle describes the movement of carbon in its many forms between the atmosphere, land, water, and living and dead organisms. About 71% of global carbon is found dissolved in oceans, while just 1% is found in the atmosphere. The amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is regulated by the oceanic reservoir of carbon. Another reservoir of carbon is fossil fuels. Also, a large amount of carbon is contributed to the atmosphere in the form of carbon dioxide during respiration by producers and consumers. Decomposers are also major contributors to the carbon pool. They break down waste materials and dead organic matter and return carbon to the atmosphere in the form of carbon dioxide. Natural events like forest fires and volcanic activities also release carbon dioxide. Apart from these sources, human activities like burning of wood and fossil fuels and rapid deforestation has also led to a marked increase in the amount of carbon in the atmosphere. Thereby affecting the carbon cycle and leading to the greenhouse effect. Have you ever wondered how this carbon cycle works? It starts with the process of photosynthesis, where green plants fix atmospheric carbon dioxide into organic compounds. Now, carbon in these plants is passed on to herbivores and then to carnivores. When these living organisms, including plants, respire, carbon dioxide is released into the atmosphere. Similarly, after animals die and decay, carbon dioxide is released into the atmosphere by the action of decomposers. Furthermore, the carbon in some dead organic matter is eliminated from active circulation as it remains buried, forming sediments, which, with the passage of time, form fossil fuels like coal, petroleum, and natural gas, and these too, when burnt, release carbon dioxide back into the atmosphere. Once again, the carbon dioxide present in the atmosphere is used by plants during the process of photosynthesis, thereby completing the carbon cycle. Like carbon, phosphorus also plays a very important role in the living world. It is a major constituent of the cell membrane, nucleic acid, teeth, bones, and cellular energy transfer systems in all living organisms. Now, let's understand the working of the phosphorus cycle, whose natural reservoirs happen to be rocks, which contain this nutrient in the form of phosphates. When rocks weather, small amounts of phosphates dissolve into the soil and is absorbed by plants. The phosphates then get passed on to animals when they consume plants. Once these animals die, phosphate solubilizing bacteria act on their bodies and release phosphates into the soil, thereby completing the phosphorus cycle. However, unlike the release of carbon into the atmosphere in the carbon cycle, there is no release of phosphorus into the atmosphere in the phosphorus cycle. Furthermore, inputs of phosphorus through rainfall are much less than that of carbon. Also, unlike in the carbon cycle, there is very little gaseous exchange of phosphorus between living organisms and the environment in the phosphorus cycle. However, the phosphorus cycle, along with other nutrient cycles, play a very important role in maintaining healthy ecosystems. Healthy and functioning ecosystems offer us a wide range of products and services known as ecosystem services. Some of the products provided by a healthy ecosystem include fruit, pure drinking water, food crops, spices, fiber, energy, and medicinal plants, among other things. A healthy ecosystem also provides us services or performs functions such as purifying water and air, maintaining soil fertility and wildlife habitats, pollination, nutrient cycling, mitigating floods and drought, and providing storage sites for carbon. However, it is difficult to assess the value of these different products and services provided by an ecosystem. But today, researchers like Robert Constanza and his colleagues are trying to assess the value of the different ecosystems, which are otherwise taken for granted as they are available freely. Researchers have found that the value of fundamental ecosystems is an average $33 trillion a year. Of the total cost of different ecosystem services, 50% is accounted for by soil, less than 10% each by services such as nutrient cycling and recreation, and about 6% each by services like wildlife habitat and climate regulation. Thus, our ecosystems are of great value. However, their services and products are limited, and so efforts must be taken to preserve natural ecosystems for the sustenance of human life.